Treasure Planet is the greatest underrated Disney film ever released, one that has surely gotten to be more appreciated in this day and age for something that did not deserve the box office failure it initially got. And so today, I finally mustered courage to talk about this film in more detail, since I've briefly mentioned it before, starting out with something I probably spent too much time talking about pertaining to villains because of how fun they really were. And of course, that means I'm mentioning John Silver in this role, fulfilling the same purpose as that was in the original version of Treasure Island, which Walt Disney also adapted earlier as his first live-action film, being Treasure Island in 1950, with Robert Newton's portrayal of the very villain Long John Silver serving as the influence for what we know pirates being portrayed as today in our modern pop culture, which you kind of also can see influenced in this version of Treasure Planet too, but also very unique in different ways that I wanted to talk about today, because he is probably one of the most diverse, unique, layered villains that Disney has ever produced that combines several good traits, being that of a twist for a hero and also an anti-villain in the sense that he is a good man who helps Jim from something he personally lost in his life as a father figure. And that is something you cannot say a lot of Disney villains ever doing at all, being in the minority that actually get redeemed at the end or never defeated in the ways you normally expect, where one of the unique facts about him, since this was at a time Disney was using more computer animation, was the fact he was traditionally animated with his organic body, while his cybernetic parts were actually computer cell shaded animation to really make this dual figure pop out more. Two sides that represent the cold commanding villain and the warm compassionate father he was. This is important to explore about his character because he is part machine and part alien, more like a mixture between a bear and a human figure conflicting with two different sides as you see throughout the film, where when you realize this, then the movie becomes something more special that deserves such appreciation for its unique approach to such a familiar, well-known story. Because when you understand what this story is about, you understand that Jim is a rebellious boy who sought more out of his life after his father abandoned him and his own mother, a thing that really isn't explored beyond that point, like just any explained reason that he couldn't handle the responsibility or just didn't want to do that at all, and how that was still very important to his character and his life that eventually shaped him into the present, the failure of others to care for what you had and what you are now. So when Billy Bones comes into the plot to give the map to Jim, it starts to change their luck for the better, to search for this legendary treasure planet that would help rebuild the inn and their lives for the relationship that both Jim and his mom has. A chance to prove something good for the family he at least does have right now, rather than what he did to escape the problems of his dad not properly being there to help. The point of being this rebellious teen you see at the beginning who gets into trouble with the law. That this point is the true driving factor of the plot more than any other treasure to discover who we really are inside, which is in fact the first moment we get to meet John Silver too, when he and his crew were actually after Billy and the map, but hidden in the shadows in a perfect way to throw someone off until it actually does happen later in the film. You do know that this man is in fact a villain since he's leading out in the front, but you also just don't know him yet as a character until the adventure starts, introduced in a completely different way as the cook of the new ship. Of course, they don't get along at first, where Jim suspects him to be that same cyborg that Bones warned about in the beginning and does sort of confirm it when he leaves it, showing that he is that villain, but then he starts to do something different as the journey treks along. This part of the film is to sell you on the fact that he is the villain that you normally suspect him to be, hidden from the viewpoint of Jim, while the crew confirms what they're actually there to do, to steal the treasure and commit to a mutiny. That the plan is clear to be after the treasure and distracting the boy to find out, but also hiding something deep inside within his character that has yet to be discovered. Sure, he's against him and you might think he'd kill the boy without hesitation at this part of the journey, but he never demonstrates any greater harm to anyone other than scolding Hawkins for getting into trouble. Of course, here in this part for interfering with his plans or his subordinates ruining it completely. Because after that happens, things actually start to change in him the moment he discovered that Jim's dad left him, that he knows something was wrong with him when he himself dived into a dangerous situation that might have gotten him killed beforehand, and now dedicates himself to shape up the boy again. Again, still a villain trying to work the boy to death from their eventual plans, but then also showing something more as the main song of the film plays, diving into Jim's own backstory as a child. It's truly something very emotional since it tosses back and forth between present and past, comparing John to his real father, who really wasn't on screen other than his figure from a distance, and of course the bottom half is his figure from his boots from Jim's point of view. Like he just really wasn't there at all from the beginning, but how Silver instead is always present by his side, really caring for him every step of the way and every chance he gets, never losing him out of his sight. So when when you do see the part where he leaves off that small ship, that really affects Jim back to the moment that his father left him and his mother, losing something he should have had his whole life, and how things really start to deteriorate in emotion from those bad memories until he actually reappears to him to offer him to ride with someone who actually does care about him and teaching him from head to toe despite his wild, reckless side. That things start to change for the better and his emotions become more positive because he didn't leave him at all. He just went out to actually test something and went back to join in the fun. And now you're starting to see something more to this villain than meets the eye, where the beginning showed you something very suspicious, but now doing something unexpected of a character of his type, caring for the hero, which his own family and his father never ever did at all. That maybe this man might not be so bad after all, even though he's obviously after the treasure, planning with his crew to a mutiny to find it. For one of the most important things to learn about his character is the way that he explains how he lost some of his organic body parts in the pursuit of the treasure.
You give up a few things, chasing a dream.
Which of course is all a subtle reason to why he turned to villainy before the events seen here, and the parallel to Jim himself about chasing a dream when someone else wasn't there to believe in him, and now finding that there is an unlikely figure within each other. This is also seen after Mr. Arrow's death during the black hole, where the blame is being put on Jim, who tried to do something but felt like he was a failure to prevent such a tragic event, trying to feel like he needs to prove his worth in some way as he took this journey to fulfill that very purpose for him and his mom.
You got the makings of greatness in you, but you gotta take the helm and charge your own course. Stick to it, no matter the squalls. And when the time comes, you get the chance to really test the cut of your sails and show what you're made of. Well, I hope I'm there, catching some of the light coming off you that day.
Every time you rewatch this scene, you really can't help but almost cry and feel super emotional, which is something no other villain could ever say or do because they're supposed to be evil, but then how Silver again does believe in Jim to do what he needs best to chart his own course, to stick to whatever he feels is right, where he will succeed far beyond his wildest dreams. The one rare instance where the villain is helping the hero find his own path in life in the most unexpected of ways during the lowest of moments, ones that were held under his own responsibility with his own villainous crew, but all done to shape for the good of what comes next. It's a powerful conflict where Jim embraces Silver in a hug, while Silver himself gets conflicted about undertaking this task under the watchful eye of his own crew, where he's still trying to control things under that heart of gold he really has. Like, you see it clearly in his face that he truly cares, but still has to tell him he doesn't, while Jim is hiding in the barrel thinking that all of this was a fraud, that he was in fact a twist villain. It's a moment that does hurt because you can feel what both are feeling at the moment, which is something they never wanted to do after bonding over something they didn't have for a long time. For the hero to have the father he always wanted, or vice versa as the son who finally gave his heart back inside a cold-hearted villain. So when you see the mutiny happen, you see that Silver had excellent chances to kill Jim, especially being a cyborg with the auto-lock accuracy, but still never actually could bring himself to do it. That he had the chance very early on when the crew got suspect and just chose to keep him around instead, making him soft and making him question if he is a villain, or more of what I talked about before as an anti-villain. That you begin to understand he is an honorable man who cares for the least brutal path as possible, keeping an eye on the treasure rather than the unnecessary harm or violence of any kind, like how he chastises Scroob for killing off Arrow or trying to kill Jim. And the next time he meets Jim after the mutiny is where he tries to convince him that all of what he said was just to prove that he didn't go soft on the crew, although we do see his heart still hard enough to see that this is a lie on his part. But the thing about this part is that it's actually both, clearly trying to convince Jim to give him the map, but also trying to get him to join. Of course, it still doesn't work, where he still has to stick to his course like he said to get the treasure out of a nasty pirate's hands who promised to blast them all, but how he still cannot do it yet again, as we see before the scene transitions over. That his words might seem tough and threatening as a villain, but his face still shows something that doesn't want that at all. That there is clearly something inside him that needs to be released for the good of them all, that strives to be better, that this man should not be a villain, but how it's all a constant back and forth between both the villain and hero until they find Treasure Planet itself to fulfill the roles they were meant for. Like, I really think because his crew is there, he's just trying to convince himself on the inside that this is what he wants. He just wants the treasure and nothing more, and tossing Jim on the side to solve it all, when that's not really the case, even if he does seem happy to find the treasure at last. Something of course that doesn't last long either, since Flint put booby traps into the planet's core, where everything has to collapse. So when you see Silver exclaim to Jim that he can't let him stand in the way of his treasure, thinking he might actually kill him, you also know that this is not true when the ship flips on his side and he sees him in danger of falling to his death. The ultimate final decision that he has to make after the film tried to make him flip-flop between good and bad, which path he would eventually take as a villain. A moment that any other villain would kill to have the chance against the hero of their story virtually getting defeated. Like, it's the rare moments that you see the plot can manage to make our hero lose if the decision is there, but how it's also not, because Silver is more than just a villain. He is Jim's real father. Of course not his real biological one, but the one who actually cares about the man's interests for who he's meant to be, like any parental figure should, saving him to live another day so he can chart his own course if seen fit, where they all manage to save their remaining lives before Silver could be tried for his eventual crimes. Where of course, knowing who he still is as a character, he tries to escape as he done before in the original, but not before a heartfelt goodbye, that Jim allows him to get away from being imprisoned because he loves him for bringing something he never had at all in his life, for believing in him and actually caring about him, with the opportunity to see the universe with this old cyborg, but how he actually refused that offer to learn to chart his own course in life, like any hero should.
You're something special, Jim. You're gonna rattle the stars, you are.
And once again, it's just another emotional moment that this villain provides more than any other with their final embrace, and the one gift he was looking for at the very beginning with the search of the treasure. Enough money to finally rebuild the inn for his family, and also given more to carry on in that very journey. And you can't really say there's anything wrong with him to going to be set free from his crimes, because he really did come through in the end. He redeemed in some way despite still being a villain inside, going off on another adventure to search for some other treasure, still winning a handful while also helping our hero achieve their initial goal on the side. The rare win-win moment for your villain and hero, you might say, where the final moment you get to see him is in the shape of the figure smiling in the clouds at him, knowing what he had done for them and what he was truly capable of doing. The good villain who fought to help others to believe in themselves, to chart whatever destiny they may actually come across. And sometimes when we feel at our lowest, the biggest help may always come in the most unexpected of ways, especially if they are the bad guys of our very story, where they can truly provide something of value in a way that showcases more than what really meets the eye, a personality that can carry through any big obstacle of what need be if one can lack the role outside of their character. How they just needed that one push to believe in what they are actually made for, and using that villain to do that was just so fantastic. And now you've looked back upon that role finally, we can all forever cement a film like Treasure Planet as a great underrated classic for all generations to see, to remind ourselves that people do care about us, but it's up to us to see that through. May the good villain prosper for all eternity and chart the courses to come. And I'm all done, so goodbye.